Chapter 1450. Everyone's gaze fell on Yuan Qin, who had been sparing no effort to proclaim that the third miss was a waste. She had always been the one to say how much of a waste Yuan Tianyi was, and that she was simply an insult to the Yuan family's bloodline. Yuan Qin's face was also green and white. She stared at Gu Shengyin as if she didn't know how she did it. At this time, the door was completely open. Gu Shengyin raised her head to look at the stone clock on the wall. Her movements were extremely slow as she squatted down, as if she was tidying her skirt. Then she leisurely rubbed her wrists, as if her movements just now had caused her wrists great discomfort. Her actions caused many people to feel contempt in their hearts. Such a small matter could actually make her this tired. It seemed that even though the third miss had barely opened the white jade door, she was still a waste in her bones. However, when Gu Shengyin finally walked through the white jade door with ease, everyone finally realized that it was already late. They looked at the wall. It was over. The Yuan family's cultivation hall had always been strict. One of the things that those teachers couldn't tolerate the most was that they didn't treat cultivation seriously. Thus, the group of people who had followed Gu Shengyin into the cultivation hall were all brought out by the strict teachers to have a good discussion. That was all for later. When Gu Shengyin entered, it did not take much effort for him to find his seat. Because the Yuan family had remembered the ancestors' order to allocate the first-class resources to the third miss, Yuan Tianyi. This cultivation hall was naturally allocated according to the first class. The cultivation hall's seats were also divided according to rank. The first-class seats were naturally the most front and most center seats. Gu Shengyin looked at the empty seat in front of her. She knew in her heart that it belonged to her. In fact, the moment she entered, all of the Yuan family's disciples in the cultivation hall turned to look at her. Among these gazes, there was curiosity, scrutiny, and disdain. If it was someone who hadn't seen the world, they would really be frightened by these gazes. But what kind of person was Gu Shengyin? She had even been an empress. Why would she be afraid of a group of youths whose average age was no more than 13 years old? She calmly walked towards her seat. Seeing her like this, the teacher who was standing at the side silently nodded in his heart. Not to mention other things, her temperament are indeed worthy of praise. However, just as Gu Shengyin reached her seat, before she could sit down, something unexpected happened. The young man sitting next to Gu Shengyin suddenly raised his head and looked coldly at Gu Shengyin. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold arc. "I never sit next to trash." As soon as the young man finished speaking, a powerful aura rose from his body and unreservedly pressed down on Gu Shengyin. From the looks of it, he actually wanted to take Gu Shengyin down a notch. The teacher next to him was shocked. He did not expect this to happen. He glanced at the person who attacked. It was Yuan Tianqin, the first young master of the Yuan family, the precious child of the Yuan family. He was one of the top geniuses in the entire Dragon Phoenix Empire. Looking at this person's appearance, it was obvious that he was dissatisfied with the third miss sitting next to him. His fingers twitched in his sleeves, but in the end, he did not make a move to stop him. Forget it, it was better not to disobey this first young master. Chapter 1451. Gu Shengyin didn't expect that the young master of the Yuan family would behave like this. She carefully sensed that Yuan Tianqin was only using his aura to oppress her. He didn't try to kill her. Even so, if Yuan Tianyi had never cultivated before, she would have been forced to kneel down and make a fool of herself. This was the first time she officially appeared in front of all the elite disciples of the Yuan family. If she made a fool of herself, how could she raise her head in the future? All these thoughts only lasted for a moment. The powerful aura had already arrived in front of Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin snorted coldly. She didn't dodge and looked directly at Yuan Tianqin. When the mountain-like aura fell on her, it was like ice meeting the sun. It didn't even cause a splash and disappeared. Yuan Tianqin's eyes lit up. His icy eyes melted a little. He finally looked at Gu Shengyin and said, "You're not bad. You're sitting next to me." Gu Shengyin sneered. This young master Yuan Tianqin probably thought that she was some kind of delicious cake. Whether or not she, Gu Shengyin, was qualified to sit here wasn't up to Yuan Tianqin. She came here today just to see the geniuses of the Yuan family. She also wanted to trick someone while she was at it. Now that she had achieved her goal, there was no need to stay any longer. Especially when there was a young master sitting next to her who thought that he could ascend to heaven. Gu Shengyin carefully looked at Yuan Tianqin. She suddenly realized that this person was really good-looking. His black clothes made his white skin look even whiter and more translucent. He looked like he was carved out of ice. He was as cold as ice and as exquisite as snow. It was no wonder that such a person with such a powerful talent would develop such an arrogant personality. However, no matter how good-looking and talented he was, Gu Shengyin's face couldn't be stepped on by such a person. Hearing Yuan Tianqin's words, Gu Shengyin only glanced at the seat next to her and didn't sit down. She only raised her eyebrows and glanced at Yuan Tianqin with a smile on her face. However, the words she said made the entire Yuan clan's cultivation hall fall into silence. Unfortunately, I have the same habit as young Master Yuan Tianqin. I can't have trash sitting next to me. Everyone in the cultivation hall felt that Yuan Tianyi was crazy. Did she really think that just because the clan had appreciated her, she could go to the heavens? So what if he felt uncomfortable? If you want to diss young master, at least come up with a proper reason. Who didn't know that Yuan Tianqin, the eldest son of the Yuan family, was a genius? She, Yuan Tianyi, was a trash who relied on the family head to enter the cultivation hall through the back door. She actually dared to mock the eldest young master? Yuan Tianqin was also stunned when he heard this. Then, he realized that the girl in front of him was mocking him. As expected, he was so angry that he laughed. Yuan Tianqin, ever since he was born, he had been the pride of the pride of the pride of the pride of the pride. He had grown up in the midst of everyone's reverence and admiration. He didn't expect that today, he would actually meet someone who dared to mock him. Yuan Tianqin felt that it was very refreshing. However, after this moment of novelty passed, he couldn't stop his monstrous anger. This little girl actually dared to mock him? He coldly stood up and looked straight at Gu Shengyin. The words that came out of his mouth were as cold as ice. What you just said, say it again. Chapter 1452. The atmosphere in the cultivation hall suddenly became tense. However, the majority of the people present were excited. In their eyes, this wasn't a big deal. Wasn't it just that the newcomer, Yuan Tianyi, didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and offended the eldest young master? They were waiting to see what would happen to the third young miss. They had never seen someone who dared to challenge the eldest young master twice in the Yuan family. Seeing that the situation wasn't going to be easy to clean up, the teacher who had been standing in the background finally stood up. He still remembered that the family head had once said that he would take care of the newcomer, the third young miss. Now, it seemed that this matter was going to get out of hand. He wasn't afraid of getting out of hand, and he didn't care if the third young miss lost face. He was only afraid that the eldest young master, Yuan Tianqin, would lose his temper. If he didn't hold back, the third young miss, who had just arrived today, would get into trouble in the cultivation hall. The teacher lightly coughed and looked at Gu Shengyin with a reproachful gaze. All right, don't be angry. Third young miss, properly apologize to the eldest young master so that we can officially start the lesson. Apologize? Gu Shengyin only felt that the teacher's words were unreasonable. Gu Shengyin sneered. When this eldest young master insulted me and even attacked me, why didn't I see you immediately intervene and ask the eldest young master to apologize to me? As soon as she said this, the surrounding people couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This third young miss really had some guts. Not only did she dare to challenge the eldest young master, she even dared to challenge the teacher of the cultivation hall. Did she not want to stay in the cultivation hall anymore? Well said. Gu Shengyin didn't want to stay in the cultivation hall anymore. However, other people didn't know what she was thinking. They all felt that this third young miss had been provoked to the point that her mind wasn't clear anymore. She even compared herself to the eldest young master. She didn't even look at the gap between them. The eldest young master and her were like the bright moon in the sky and the smelly ditch in the wilderness. Where did she get her face from? Most people thought so in their hearts, but only Yuan Qin said it out loud. Yuan Qin had always disliked Yuan Tianyi. In the past, they simply thought that Yuan Tianyi was lucky and easy to bully. Now, it was complete jealousy and hatred. She was jealous of her good fortune and hated a good-for-nothing like her, yet she dared to live so arrogantly. Therefore, when no one wanted to stand out, Yuan Qin stood out. In fact, what she thought in her heart was right. Now that she came out, she could ridicule Yuan Tianyi. She could also sell her favor in front of the eldest son, Yuan Tianqin. What if he was lucky enough to make young master remember him? No matter how Yuan Qin thought about it, she felt that it was worth it. It was just that she didn't think that if she could think of something, how could others not think of it? If there were really so many benefits and there were so many smart people in the Yuan family, would it be Yuan Qin's turn to take advantage of it? In the end, before the third young Mrs. Backer was revealed, those people simply did not dare to offend her too much. If they were to fail miserably, it would truly be an undeserved disaster. Only Yuan Qin was stupid. Not only was she stupid, but she also liked to show off. Therefore, after she heard Gu Xingyin's words, she stood out and scolded, "Yuan Tianyi, I say, why don't you take a mirror and look at yourself? A good-for-nothing like you doesn't even have enough status to carry the eldest young master's shoes. You still have the face to compare yourself with him?" Yuan Tianqin didn't even try to hide this matter. However, his talent was there. The entire Yuan family saw him as the hope of the future. The rule of not killing one's own family was like a fart to him. This teacher didn't have a good impression of Gu Xingyin. It was just that the head of the family told him to look after the third young miss, Yuan Tianyi. He didn't want to let the third young miss fall into the hands of eldest young master on the first day. Otherwise, this would probably be the last time the third young miss appeared in the cultivation hall. No, according to what the third young miss said today, if she fell into the hands of eldest young master, it would probably be the last time she saw the sun. Chapter 1454. The teacher thought about it and decided that he couldn't follow the eldest young master's wishes this time. If the family head were to blame him, he wouldn't be able to say anything. With that in mind, he turned around and shouted at Gu Xin, "Did the third young miss not hear what I said? You don't even want to listen to your teacher's words. Do you not want to stay in this cultivation hall?" In his mind, the Yuan Estate's cultivation hall was a sacred place in the hearts of all the Yuan family disciples. If he used this to threaten Gu Xingyin, she would definitely obediently submit. However, what the teacher didn't expect was that the third young miss, Yuan Tianyi, only lazily glanced at him and actually nodded. "After seeing such a big show today, I really don't have any intention of staying in this cultivation hall." The teacher suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. What did she just say? He subconsciously glanced to his side and discovered that most of the Yuan family disciples had the same expression as him, as if they had seen a ghost. Strangely, his heart relaxed a lot. This time, the teacher was really angry. He had dedicated his entire life to the Yuan family's cultivation hall and regarded this place as more important than himself. He simply couldn't tolerate Gu Xingyin's actions of not taking his blood, sweat, and tears seriously. Moreover, this third young miss wasn't some peerless genius at the peak of the world. She was just a piece of trash that even they would look down on in their cultivation hall. What right did such a person have to look down on them? The teacher's expression was extremely unsightly. He coldly glanced at Gu Xingyin. "This old man will report the third young miss's words to the family head. I hope that the third young miss can still be so unyielding in front of the family head in a while." Gu Xingyin nodded. "Since that's the case, I'll take my leave first." She actually walked towards the door without any reluctance. "Did I say that you can leave?" A gloomy and cold voice came from behind Gu Xingyin. At the same time, Yuan Tianqin's eyes flashed with a fierce glint. Above his head, the image of an enormous dragon condensed from ice and frost appeared. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it clawed at Gu Xingyin. From the looks of it, he wasn't holding back. If Gu Xingyin had really been caught, his head would have been crushed by the claw. Yuan Tianheng's pupils shrank when he saw this scene. He knew that he couldn't save them in time, so he couldn't help but look at his teacher. What shocked him was that Mr. was looking at him coldly at this moment, without any intention of helping him. He also didn't want to leave Yuan Tianyi alive. Yuan Tianheng's heart trembled as he looked at Gu Shengyin. Suddenly, Gu Shengyin heard the commotion and turned his head around slowly. The shadow of the giant dragon appeared above her head in an instant. However, at this moment, a green figure suddenly appeared behind her. It was a very ethereal figure in a green robe. Upon closer inspection, he seemed to be holding a huge scepter in his hand. The shadow seemed to be offended as he let out a cold snort. A green light shot out from the scepter in his hand and was aimed at the frost dragon that was about to touch Gu Shengyin. The giant dragon was hit by the green light and stagnated in the air for a second. Then, its entire body shot out and turned into a gorgeous ice mist in the air, disappearing without a trace. Gu Shengyin looked at the silent Yuan Tianqin with a faint smile. Remember, don't call me trash every time you open your mouth. Be careful, you'll be slapped in the face. When she turned around again, the way the people looked at her had completely changed. How could someone who could easily block the eldest young master's attack be trash? Moreover, she was only 10 years old. Chapter 1455. Yuan Tianqin glared at Gu Shengyin. Upon closer inspection, the depths of his eyes seemed to be quietly entwined with crimson streaks of blood. If there was someone who understood him here, they would definitely realize that he was really angry. There were very few people who could infuriate young Master Yuan and survive in this world. Yuan Tianqin saw that Gu Shengyin didn't even turn her head to look at the people in the hall, including himself. He was so angry that he started to laugh. Suddenly, ice and snow appeared around him, filling the entire cultivation hall. Gu Shengyin stopped in her tracks. She turned around, and there was no smile on her face. Yuan Tianqin, do you want to die? The disciples of the Yuan family in the cultivation hall were really frightened today. That third miss, who was known throughout the family as a waste, actually dared to provoke the eldest young master in front of everyone, and even showed her exceptional talent and strength. This was already hard to believe, but this third miss was even more arrogant than the eldest young master. Just listen to what she said. Although everyone admitted that the third miss, who was only 10 years old, was really powerful, the eldest young master Yuan Tianqin had been in everyone's hearts for a long time. No one thought that Gu Shengyin could win against Yuan Tianqin. She was still too young and couldn't keep her cool. Many people thought so in their hearts. Yuan Qin, on the other hand, was looking at Gu Shengyin with schadenfreude. When Gu Shengyin showed that she could fight against Yuan Tianqin, Yuan Qin was shocked. All of this seemed to have subverted her understanding, that Yuan Tianyi, who had always been a waste under her, was actually so powerful. After the shock, she was terrified. Only she knew how many excessive things she had done to Yuan Tianyi. But Yuan Tianyi also knew. It was because of this that Yuan Qin was afraid. It didn't matter if Yuan Tianyi was really a waste or just biding her time. Now that she had shown her talent and strength, the family would definitely focus on training her. As for herself, she was the one who had severely offended Yuan Tianyi. Putting herself in Yuan Qin's shoes, she didn't think that Yuan Tianyi would let her go. Therefore, when Gu Shengyin recklessly provoked Yuan Tianqin, no one was happier than Yuan Qin. She couldn't wait for Yuan Tianyi to be a bit more arrogant, completely provoking the anger of the eldest young master, making the eldest young master confront her. It would be best if eldest young master could cripple this person. With eldest young master's talent, even if Yuan Tianyi was crippled, nothing would happen to him, right? Yuan Qin was silently looking forward to it. Hearing Gu Shengyin's words, Yuan Tianqin's heart was filled with killing intent. He looked down at Gu Shengyin from above and said coldly, "If you kneel down and beg me to let you go now, I can consider it." Chi. Gu Shengyin sneered, "Where does your confidence come from? Just because you've eaten a few more years than me?" After saying this, her expression suddenly changed, and she looked at Yuan Tianqin strangely. At the same time, the space in front of Gu Shengyin seemed to be slightly distorted, and a red figure suddenly appeared beside her. As soon as that person appeared, the entire cultivation hall instantly became silent. Except for a small number of people who were absent-minded because of his charm, most of the Yuan family's disciples were directly unable to speak under that terrifying pressure. In fact, it was already very difficult for them to support themselves and stand. Lin Yuan looked straight at Yuan Tianqin. What you just said, say it again. Chapter 1456. Every time he said a word, the pressure that fell on Yuan Tianqin's body became even heavier. By the time he finished asking, bean-sized beads of sweat had already appeared on Yuan Tianqin's forehead. It was obvious that he was under a lot of pressure at the moment. The teacher next to him looked at the man in red who suddenly appeared in the Yuan family's cultivation hall. He forcibly suppressed the shock in his heart and asked, "Who are you? Why did you appear in my Yuan family's cultivation hall?" Lin Yuan didn't even look at him. He just said indifferently, "Shut up." The teacher was furious. He was about to say something, but he was shocked to find that he couldn't open his mouth. He widened his eyes and stared at Lin Yuan in horror. Who the hell is this person? Lin Yuan just looked down at Yuan Tianqin in front of him with a pale face and pursed lips. There was no warmth in his cold eyes. "Speak." Yuan Tianqin had been bitterly resisting. He gritted his teeth and didn't speak, but the moment Lin Yuan said that word, his mouth opened uncontrollably. He looked a little frightened when he found that he couldn't control himself at all. He said word by word, "If now you kneel down and beg me to let you go, I can still consider it." Yuan Tianqin had never felt such deep despair before. From the moment he was born, he was the pride of the heavens. After his talent was tested, he was flattered by the entire Yuan family and cultivated with the best resources. He never knew what it felt like to be powerless, and he had never felt the feeling of being humiliated like an ant. This man. Yuan Tianqin clenched his teeth. The tip of his tongue even tasted the taste of blood. One day, he would return all the humiliation he had suffered today. And Yuan Tianyi, that bitch, he would make them die a horrible death. However, before he could finish thinking about the future, he heard the man beside him say indifferently, "Kneel down." Yuan Tianqin didn't have time to react. His legs involuntarily knelt on the ground. There was a loud bang. Yuan Tianqin felt that this time, it wasn't just his legs that knelt down, but also his self-esteem. The rest of the Yuan family's children were completely stunned. They never thought that things would develop to this point. They looked at Yuan Tianqin, who was usually like a god, who had no power to resist in front of this man. He was like an ant that could be trampled upon by others. So the peerless genius of the Yuan clan was still such an insignificant existence in the eyes of a true expert? Gu Shengyin was the only one who was in a normal mood. She clearly told Lin Yuan not to come out unless it was a critical moment, but from the looks of it, this man still couldn't hold it in. Although the other party didn't listen to her, it didn't affect Gu Shengyin's good mood. Today, she had come here to slap their faces. Lin Yuan's method was undoubtedly even more thorough than hers. Moreover, it was obvious that the other party was here to open her eyes. The feeling of hugging a golden finger, oh no, a golden thigh and waiting for death, was not bad. She thought with a smile. Just as she was distracted, Lin Yuan spoke again. "If you apologize to me now and kowtow 3 times, I will consider sparing your life." Gu Shengyin couldn't help but smile. This man was really, of course, Yuan Tianqin wouldn't be willing. How could a person like him, who had been successful all his life, tolerate himself doing such a shameless thing? But this wasn't something he was willing to do. Chapter 1457. Because, just after Lin Yuan said those words, Yuan Tianqin had already noticed that there seemed to be a force controlling his body in the dark. Even though he clenched his teeth and the tip of his tongue was bleeding, he still said those words. "Tian, I apologize to you today." Yuan Tianqin closed his eyes in pain. He even felt that if he had a choice at this moment, he would rather bang his head on the ground and die than say such humiliating words in front of so many people. But he had no choice. In Lin Yuan's words, it would be, "You want to die? No problem, after kowtowing and apologizing, you can die as you please." He just stood there quietly and watched Yuan Tianqin apologize and kowtow. The moment his forehead touched the ground, the hatred in Yuan Tianqin's heart reached its peak. He swore. One day, he would send this man and woman to the Yellow Springs. Yuan Qin, who was watching from the side, was completely pale. At this time, when she looked at Lin Yuan again, she no longer felt that his face was incomparably magnificent. This man was simply a demon. Her body couldn't help but tremble. This man didn't even put Yuan Tianqin, the Yuan family's most powerful genius, in his eyes. Why would he care about her? Right now, she could only try her best to hide behind someone else and pray that the man didn't notice her. Lin Yuan, you've gone too far. A voice that contained anger sounded in the cultivation hall. At the same time, the figure of an old man appeared in front of Lin Yuan. It was the Yuan family's old ancestor. When he appeared, Yuan Tianqin had just finished kowtowing 3 times. As soon as the old man appeared, Yuan Tianqin felt the shackles on his body disappear. He immediately stood up. Old ancestor. Seeing the old man, Yuan Tianqin's eyes lit up and he shouted. As the most talented heir of the Yuan family's younger generation, Yuan Tianqin had naturally seen the old ancestor before. When the others heard his call, they all looked at the old man with excited eyes. The Yuan family's old ancestor. That was a legendary figure. It was said that even the emperor of the Dragon Phoenix Empire had to respectfully bow to him as a junior. Yuan Tianqin's heart relaxed, and the resentment that he had been suppressing uncontrollably emerged. He pointed at Lin Yuan. Forefather, it was this person and Yuan Tianyi behind him who forced me to be humiliated and even wanted my life. With the patriarch by his side, he instantly gained confidence. The old ancestor's expression wasn't good either. When he sensed the aura of the Abyss Lord, he came over just in time to see his most favored junior kowtowing to Yuan Tianyi. Although ancient summoners were indeed powerful, in terms of closeness, Yuan Tianyi's position in his heart was obviously not as high as Yuan Tianqin, whom he had been paying attention to for more than 10 years. The Abyssal Lord was powerful, but doing things like this was clearly trampling on the Yuan family's face. The Yuan family patriarch looked at Lin Yuan with an unpleasant expression, but his tone was still considered polite. Lin Yuanjun, you've disturbed my Yuan family's cultivation hall with such fanfare. Can you tell this old man what you mean by this? As soon as he spoke, Lin Yuan knew that he was on Yuan Tianqin's side. He didn't even ask what had happened. Thinking of this, he looked at Gu Shengyin with some heartache. Although he knew that Tianyi didn't have a good life in the Yuan family, he still felt angry when he saw her being treated like this with his own eyes. Chapter 1458. Since he was angry, Lin Yuan naturally wouldn't hold it in. He turned to look at the Yuan family patriarch. His gaze actually made the Yuan family patriarch feel a trace of pressure. The Yuan family patriarch's heart trembled. He had heard of the 9 Hells Purgatory's ruler, but had never fought him. Previously, he had always thought that even if there was a gap between them, it wouldn't be too big. He didn't expect that a single gaze from him would make him feel threatened. Then, he heard Lin Yuan's cold voice. Yuan family patriarch, I was polite to you earlier only because Tianyi is a member of the Yuan family. If not for that, do you think someone like you would be worthy of my courtesy? These words were already quite impolite. However, the Yuan family patriarch didn't immediately retort. This was because the moment Lin Yuan spoke, the Yuan family's patriarch sensed that an aura had locked onto him from the unseen world the moment Lin Yuan spoke. At his level, he had a certain degree of sensitivity to life and death. He could roughly estimate that if he were to become enemies with this person in front of him, he would be the one to fall in the end. As for the Yuan family disciples at the side, they were all stunned. In their eyes, the Yuan family patriarch was an existence akin to a god. With him around, no one dared to shake the Yuan family in the slightest. But now, there was actually someone who dared to say such arrogant words in front of the Yuan family patriarch? Did this man not know the immensity of heaven and earth, or was he strong enough to not fear the entire Yuan family? Soon they found out the answer. Because the omnipotent patriarch in their eyes didn't say anything in the face of such arrogant provocation. The patriarch lowered his head. Yuan Tianqin felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured into his heart. It was as if it was only at this moment that he truly realized what kind of existence he had provoked. An expert that even his own patriarch had to retreat from. The Yuan family patriarch felt that it was a bit embarrassing to act like this in front of a junior, but at his level, he wouldn't be disturbed by such emotions. He said in a low voice, "Although Lin Yuan is strong, you should still be reasonable, right?" Reasonable? It was only when one's martial strength was inferior that the weaker side needed to be reasonable. This was the first time the Yuan family patriarch, who had been strong all his life, said such words. Lin Yuan's gaze paused. Reasonable? He actually nodded his head in a carefree manner. It's fine to be reasonable. This junior of your family scolded my contractor as trash and wanted Tianyi to kneel and beg for mercy. He even wanted her life. Although his tone was calm, each sentence was colder than the last. The Yuan family's old ancestor had only just found out about this matter. Just by thinking about it and connecting it to Yuan Tianqin's temperament, he could roughly understand what had happened. At this time, Lin Yuan suddenly sneered, "I've lived for 10,000 years. This is the first time I've seen someone step on my face like this. Tell me." He looked at the patriarch of the Yuan family and asked, "Does such a person deserve to die?" The Yuan family's old ancestor's heart immediately calmed down. After contracting a magical beast and a summoner had a low-level contract, they would become one entity. Insulting one of them was equivalent to insulting both of them. Tianqin actually said such a thing? No wonder Lord Lin Yuan was so angry. If it was him, and he was treated like this by a junior, he would have been unable to endure it long ago. Even so, Yuan Tianqin was his most promising successor, the future hope of the Yuan family. He couldn't watch anything happen to him. Chapter 1459. The Yuan family's elder immediately turned his head and scolded Yuan Tianqin. "Junior, you don't know any better. Why aren't you apologizing to Lord Abyss?" Yuan Tianqin was dumbfounded. If he didn't hear wrong, the man in red with an imposing aura just now said that Yuan Tianyi was his contractor? This person wasn't human, but a demonic beast? A demonic beast that could cultivate into a human form. His heart trembled violently because of this thought. But soon, his panic turned into unwillingness. How could a trash like Yuan Tianyi contract with such a powerful demonic beast? No wonder she changed so much. Yuan Tianqin couldn't help but think that if he could also have such a powerful demonic beast, would today's matter be completely different? He didn't think that he, a person with a 9th-level summoner talent, could have the ability to summon a demonic beast like Lord Abyss. Even if he did summon a demonic beast like Lord Abyss, it wouldn't ask for anything from a human, and it wouldn't agree to contract with a human. No matter what he thought, on the surface, Yuan Tianqin bowed to Lord Abyss willingly this time and apologized again. But Lord Abyss didn't have any reaction. At this time, if he wanted to give the Yuan family's elder face, he should say a few words and let this matter pass. But Lord Abyss didn't, which meant this matter wasn't over yet. The Yuan family's elder felt a surge of anger in his heart, but he suppressed it. He couldn't be angry, it was useless, he wasn't Lord Abyss's opponent. Yuan Tianqin, on the other hand, was anxious. Since he saw the elder's attitude towards this person, he had put away his arrogance and pride. This man wasn't someone he could afford to offend. Seeing that Lord Abyss didn't respond, the Yuan family's elder took a deep breath and said, "Lord Abyss, what else are you dissatisfied with?" Lord Abyss's gaze fell on Gu Shengyin, who was standing on the side and watching the show, and said, "What? Apologize to me? Don't you know who you offended?" He didn't need to think to know that this family lowered their heads only because he was here. If he wasn't here today, who knew how much Tianyi would have suffered? Lord Abyss's heart was filled with anger. If he didn't vent this anger, he wouldn't be happy. The Yuan family's patriarch looked at Gu Shengyin, who was standing at the side. His expression was very amiable as he said, "Little Tianyi, you see, your brother Tianqin is young and impetuous, so it's inevitable that he would speak a little rashly. After all, you're also a member of the Yuan family. We're all family. Shouldn't we be more lenient whenever possible?" He felt that as a saint-level expert and Yuan Tianyi's elder, this 10-year-old girl should at least give him some face. However, Gu Shengyin used the truth to tell him that he was thinking too much. When Gu Shengyin heard the Yuan family patriarch's words, she widened her eyes and stared at him. He looked as innocent as he could be, But the words he said made the Yuan family's old ancestor and Yuan Tianqin's faces darken. That's right. You're young and impetuous. So when you open your mouth, you want me to kneel down. When you close your mouth, you want my life. When Lin Yuan heard this, he chuckled. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I won't let them off easily. Tian Yi's temperament was indeed to his liking. The Yuan family's old ancestor didn't expect this junior to not give him any face. Chapter 1460. He said in a heavy tone, "Little girl, it's better to leave some leeway. After all, you're also a member of the Yuan family." He was warning her. Gu Shengyin sneered. Yuan family? If it weren't for Lin Yuan, I'm afraid I wouldn't be in this world anymore. She looked at Lin Yuan, and he nodded. The onlookers didn't know what they were talking about. Gu Shengyin turned around. Since I've been raised by the Yuan family for 10 years, I'll take Yuan Tianqin's life this time to repay the Yuan family's kindness. What do you think? She was going to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Yuan family. The Yuan family ancestor felt his heart ache when he heard this. He knew what kind of terrifying talent this little girl had. If she stayed in the Yuan family with Tianqin, he was confident that the Yuan family would be able to suppress the other families and become the strongest family in the Dragon Phoenix Empire. However, after thinking about it, he realized that even if he left Yuan Tianyi in the Yuan family, she would still be at odds with the Yuan family. He might as well hold on to Tianqin and have a chance to take revenge in the future. He nodded with a helpless expression. Tianyi, you're still a descendant of the Yuan family. I didn't expect you to be like this, without any attachment to the Yuan family. Gu Shengyin sneered. Everyone knows what the truth is like. There's no need to act like this. Even if the ancestor doesn't find it tiring, it hurts my eyes. With Lin Yuan as her backer, Gu Shengyin wasn't afraid of offending the Yuan family ancestor at all. Moreover, she had already thoroughly offended him. Both sides swore an oath. Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief when she said that she was no longer a member of the Yuan family. This world attached great importance to family clans. If she did anything in the future, the Yuan family would always tie her hands and feet. She might as well take this opportunity to make a clean break. On the other hand, the Yuan family's old ancestor's face was dark as he looked at her relieved expression. His heart was filled with killing intent. Today, he had felt the humiliation he had never felt before in his life. In the end, all of this was caused by this Yuan family junior in front of him. He would remember it bit by bit and find an opportunity to return it. At this moment, he didn't even want to look at the two of them. He only said in a deep voice, "Since the two of you don't like my Yuan family, then please." However, Lin Yuan did not move. He said, "There's no hurry. There are still 2 things I haven't done yet." Hearing Zhang Xian's tone, the Yuan clan's patriarch panicked. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. 2 blood-curdling screams came from the Yuan family disciple beside him. The Yuan family's old ancestor immediately looked at Yuan Tianqin, who was beside him. He saw blood flowing out from the corner of Yuan Tianqin's mouth. Yuan Tianqin was looking at him with eyes full of hatred and unwillingness. His tongue had just been cut off by someone. The Yuan family patriarch suddenly looked at Lin Yuan. "Why didn't you keep your word?" Lin Yuan said calmly, "You don't keep your word? I only promised to spare his dog life. What's the point of keeping this tongue that doesn't know how to speak?" As for the other one, his tone was full of disgust. "You keep calling people trash. Have a taste of what it's like to be trash who can't cultivate." The other one he was talking about was Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin was currently lying on the ground with a pale face. Just now, she suddenly felt as if an invisible hand had violently pulled something out of her body. Chapter 1461. She didn't react at first, but now she knew. That terrifying man had actually crippled her. Yuan Qin forgot to be afraid this time. She didn't have any strength, so she could only look at Lin Yuan with resentful eyes, wishing she could drink his blood. But how could Lin Yuan be afraid of her? He said faintly, "If you keep looking, don't even think about keeping your eyes." Yuan Qin didn't lose her mind. She knew that this man would definitely do what he said. She could only lower her head in resentment. She hated it. After the intense resentment, there was despair. What did she rely on to come to the main family from the side branch? He relied on his talent. But now, she had become like this. After staying in the main family for a few years, Yuan Qin clearly knew how ruthless this family was. Once she was of no use to the family, she, who came from the side branch, would definitely go back to where she came from. Yuan Qin had a flamboyant personality. When she returned home in the past, she showed off to her brothers and sisters who were not as talented as her and offended many people. She used to think that she would be like this for the rest of her life. Who would have thought that she would encounter such a thing? Thinking about it, she knew what she would face if she was sent back like this. For a moment, Yuan Qin felt that she might as well die and be done with it. But she didn't have the courage. After a while, Yuan Qin raised her head, but sadly found that not many people cared about her. Even the old ancestor only had eyes for the eldest young master who had his tongue cut off. Yuan Qin laughed at herself. Yes, she was just one of the many disciples of the Yuan family. It didn't matter if there was one more or one less. How could she compare to the eldest young master? She saw that the old ancestor was angry because of the eldest young master and seemed to be arguing with the other side. But the man in red on the opposite side had always been indifferent, firmly protecting Yuan Tianyi behind him. In the end, the old ancestor was helpless. Under the gaze of so many Yuan family disciples, Lin Yuan took Yuan Tianyi's hand and left the Yuan family. The two didn't even pack their things. However, Yuan Tianyi really didn't have anything to pack. Both of them knew what kind of life he used to live in the Yuan family. You were really, Lin Yuan tilted his head. Gu Shengyin smiled. Especially handsome. Lin Yuan smiled when he heard this. Where do you want to go? Gu Shengyin shook her head and thought for a moment. Let's go to your territory and have a look. In the very beginning of the story, Yuan Tianyi, who had become a winner in life, had no place to conquer. Lin Yuan was cold for a moment, then he bent his eyes. All right. The two of them spent 2 days to arrive at the legendary Nine Hells Purgatory, the place where humans could enter but never leave. After that, she lived there for 10 years. In 10 years, the entire magical beast continent was in turmoil, and geniuses emerged in large numbers. However, no one knew that a girl with the bloodline of an ancient summoner was quietly growing. Lin Yuan was sitting on a cliff. Colorful flowers bloomed on both sides of the cliff. When the wind blew, one could smell the greasy fragrance of the flowers. Further away, one could see many green trees. It was actually a very lively valley. No one had ever imagined that the legendary Nine Hells Purgatory would look like this. However, if you look down from the cliff from the edge of the cliff, you will know that this is still Nine Hells Purgatory. Because at the bottom of this unfathomably deep cliff, there was no misty cloud, but scarlet flames. Chapter 1462. That flame was not an ordinary flame, but the most tyrannical and powerful 9 underworld hellfire in the entire 9 underworld purgatory. No matter if it was a human or any other creature, they would die upon contact with it, and not even their bones would remain, turning into ashes. From the beginning to the end, there was only one exception. The ruler of the 9 underworld purgatory who was born from the 9 underworld hellfire, Lin Yuan. The 9 underworld hellfire that others avoided was not only not terrifying to Lin Yuan, but was instead very intimate. Lin Yuan. A clear voice came from behind him. Lin Yuan did not turn his head, but his face revealed a trace of a smile. He knew who had come. He turned around and saw that girl wearing a sky-blue dress riding on a silver-white fur magic beast, coming towards him. That magic beast had silver-white fur, and when it ran, it was like moonlight falling on her body. She had gentle big blue eyes, and a white jade-like horn standing on top of her head, looking very beautiful. This very gentle-looking magic beast was precisely the one that Gu Shengyin encountered after coming to the 9 underworld purgatory. It was also Yuan Tianyi's contracted magic beast in the very beginning of the storyline, Moonlight Unicorn. In the Unicorn clan, as long as their bloodline was pure, almost all of them surpassed the 9th rank magic beast and entered the Holy Beast level. and the moonlight unicorn was considered a king-level existence among the unicorns, famous because of its extremely unique fur that flowed down like the cold moonlight. However, Gu Xingyin's contracted magic beast was Lin Yuan, and this moonlight unicorn was only one of her many summoned magic beasts. When it came to Gu Xingyin, the advantage of an ancient summoner was truly reflected. After experiencing so many worlds, Gu Xingyin's soul power could be described as endless. And the number of magic beasts that an ancient summoner could summon was completely dependent on how strong her soul power was. Even Lin Yuan, after feeling Gu Xingyin's soul, couldn't help but exclaim, this kind of bloodline, in addition to the soul power that was like the blessing of the gods. As a contractor, he was simply like the darling of the heavenly Tao. As the protagonist, wasn't he the darling of the heavenly Tao? Not to mention, Gu Xingyin had such a huge cheat on her. The moonlight unicorn stopped when it was about 30 meters away from the waterside abyss. She bent her knees slightly and bent her body so that Gu Xingyin could get down more easily. Gu Xingyin jumped down from her back and reached out to touch her head. Ah Yao, thank you. The moonlight unicorn gently rubbed against her hand before leaving. Gu Xingyin walked towards the people at the edge of the cliff. Lin Yuan didn't like to be disturbed, so these magical beasts were very tactful and spontaneously stopped when they were still a long time away from him. From the beginning to the end, the only one who could get close to him without fear of being rejected was Gu Xingyin. Are you going out? The person who asked was Lin Yuan. Gu Xingyin nodded. How can the Zhen family get first place in the summoner conference that is held once every 20 years? She had heard that the peerless genius of the Zhen family was the most promising person to get first place. Wasn't the peerless genius of the Zhen family Yuan Tianqin? Losing his tongue didn't affect his cultivation. On the contrary, it was said that his cultivation speed had increased a lot in the past 10 years. Gu Xingyin was more concerned about another news. Chapter 1463. Because the eldest young master of the Yuan family couldn't speak, he always had a girl by his side. He didn't know what kind of method she used, but the girl was able to perceive what the eldest young master wanted to say at the first moment and express it. For this point, even if the girl couldn't cultivate, she was still the number one person beside Yuan Tianqin. This girl was Yuan Qin. Gu Xingyin didn't know how Yuan Qin did it. She only knew that she absolutely couldn't let the combination of Yuan Qin and Yuan Tianqin take first place. When she told Lin Yuan her thoughts, Lin Yuan was still very disapproving. The two who offended you back then. If you really don't like them, I'll just take their lives. Gu Xingyin shook his head. For Yuan Qin and Yuan Tianqin, it would be more unbearable for them to be easily defeated by a person they had always looked down on and let them know that they were worse than trash, than asking them to die. Gu Xingyin had plenty of time to slowly waste time with them. She said her thoughts. Even if Lin Yuan didn't necessarily agree, he wouldn't refute her. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. It seemed that since she came to this world, Lin Yuan had never objected to any of her thoughts. He always indulged her. Aren't you afraid that I will be raised to have a lawless temperament? Gu Xingyin said. Lin Yuan looked at her with a smile. So what if you're lawless? With me here, would there be anyone on this continent who doesn't have eyes and provokes you? Gu Xingyin suddenly looked at him and said, no matter what I want, will you agree and not refuse? Her tone seemed a little serious. Lin Yuan looked at her for a second, not knowing what she was thinking. However, after thinking carefully for a moment, he still nodded. As long as I have it, as long as I can give it. After he finished speaking, he felt a blur in front of his eyes, and a pair of slightly cold hands had already wrapped around his neck. Lin Yuan didn't feel anything wrong. This kind of intimacy was just a common occurrence for the two of them. But today seemed a little different. After Gu Xingyin wrapped her arms around his neck, her whole body leaned towards him. Their foreheads touched, and they could hear each other's breathing. Gu Xingyin looked into Lin Yuan's eyes. Lin Yuan's pupils looked no different from an ordinary person's, but at such a close distance, she could see that his pupils were not the same black as an ordinary person's, but were dyed with a faint layer of dark red. Very beautiful, Gu Xingyin thought. Lin Yuan's expression didn't change. He just focused on Gu Xingyin, as if he was thinking about what she was going to do. Gu Xingyin smiled sweetly. You said that no matter what I want, as long as you can give it to me, you will give it to me, right? Lin Yuan's voice seemed to carry a trace of disorder. However, he still nodded. It is as you have heard. Gu Xingyin blinked. What if I want you? Silence. A wind blew from the bottom of the cliff, carrying a trace of the unique coldness of the 9 underworlds' fire. Lin Yuan did not speak. Gu Xingyin was not in a hurry, and looked at him patiently. Then she felt her waist tighten, and a pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist. A hoarse voice sounded in her ear, "If you want it." Gu Xingyin burst out laughing. She stepped back a little and received a somewhat dissatisfied look from Lin Yuan. Then tell me, is it you who wants it, or I want it? Chapter 1464. Lin Yuan looked at Gu Xingyin with a complacent smile, as if he had already guessed something. He couldn't help but laugh as well. Holding her tightly in his arms, he sighed, I've been waiting for you for a long time, and I've finally heard your words. Gu Xingyin leaned against his chest and could clearly hear his powerful and rapid heartbeat. It was for her. She had some bad thoughts and said, I've been waiting for a long time. How old was I at that time? I didn't expect you to be such a person. Hearing the hidden laughter in her words, Lin Yuan didn't expose her. He replied very seriously, In fact, Tianyi, from the night you summoned me 10 years ago, you were destined to only belong to me in this life. His heart was very small and could only accommodate one person. Moreover, that person could only belong to her. From Gu Xingyin's summoned magical beasts, it could be seen that they were all docile and cute female beasts, and there wasn't even a single male beast. Moreover, even if it was a female beast, he wouldn't allow Gu Xingyin to be too close to them. This man was even jealous of magical beasts. When Gu Xingyin heard his swear-like words, she was stunned for a moment, and then the smile on her face disappeared. She looked at Lin Yuan seriously and said, What a coincidence. Actually, when I first saw you 10 years ago, I felt that such a beautiful and powerful man must belong to me. Lin Yuan's eyes trembled for a moment, and the corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. Well, when your matters are over, let's conclude a companion contract, right? A companion contract. With the soul as an oath, the two people who became companions would share everything about their companions, including their lifespan, cultivation, status. This kind of ancient contract had long been lost in the current magical beast continent. Unexpectedly, this man still remembered it. Gu Xingyin looked at the smile on his face and pretended not to hear the disorderly heartbeat in his ears. All right. She thought for a moment and suddenly remembered something. So she said to Lin Yuan, Close your eyes. Lin Yuan didn't quite understand what she was going to do, but he still obediently closed his eyes. Gu Xingyin stretched out her right hand. A bright green light shone from her hand, and then, Open your eyes. Lin Yuan opened his eyes but was stunned. A sky full of red petals fell down, fluttering about as if there was no end, drowning the two of them in this wave of fire. In front of him was a bouquet of red flowers in full bloom. This flower, Lin Yuan suddenly remembered that 10 years ago, Tianyi seemed to have given him a similar flower. It seemed to be called rose. Gu Xingyin handed the flower to him and said with a smile, In a faraway place, people there use this kind of red rose to symbolize warm and beautiful love. This kind of flower is also used during courtship. I'm giving him to you now, Lin Yuan. 99 red roses symbolize everlasting love. She smiled like a flower. Are you willing to accept it? Lin Yuan stretched out his hand and embraced Gu Xingyin into his arms with the flower. The rain of flowers still didn't stop, and soon the ground was covered with a thick layer of red petals. The two people, one in red and one in blue, quietly embraced each other in this fiery world. It seemed to be, as Gu Xingyin said, eternal and unchanging. Chapter 1465. After some time, Gu Xingyin and Lin Yuan left the 9 Hells Purgatory and began to set foot on the magical beast continent that they hadn't been to for 10 years. The Summoner Conference had been going on for a long time. Those summoners without any background naturally needed to start from the lowest level of competition and go up one round at a time. However, It was different for the summoners from the big families and forces. They could directly skip the beginning of the competition and directly enter the last few rounds of the assessment. Regarding this, whether it was those summoners without background or those with background, they had no objections. The reason was that from the beginning of the competition, the number of people who advanced in each round was determined. Those civilian summoners had a lot less innate advantages compared to those summoners with the support of big families' resources. And if there were no summoners from big families participating, the number of people who advanced could also be increased. And for those summoners with powerful backgrounds, the early rounds of the competition weren't difficult. It was nothing more than a waste of time to increase their exposure. So everyone tacitly agreed with this rule. Only a small number of people might have different ideas. For example, this time, the most popular winner was the eldest son of the Yuan family, Yuan Tianqin. This person started from the first round of the preliminary test and went up one round at a time. What he wanted was not only first place, but also fame throughout the continent. So he had to participate in every round. Not only did he have to participate, but he had to win. Not only did he have to win, but he had to win beautifully. He had to win shock. But Yuan Tianqin's so-called shock method was a bit excessive. Every summoner who fought against Yuan Tianqin was almost beaten half to death. None of the summoners who were defeated by him came out unscathed. The lighter ones vomited blood, the heavier ones were even crippled on the spot, and even their summoned beasts were bitten to death by Yuan Tianqin's purple-winged thunder dragon. So along with Yuan Tianqin's reputation as a genius, there was also his tyranny, but even so, there were still countless young summoners who worshipped this man and even set him as their goal. As for the summoners you mentioned who were defeated and crippled by his hands, their skills were inferior. Who could they blame? When Gu Xingyin sat in the tea house and heard such remarks, she simply laughed in her heart. Just because you're strong and you've won, you can easily destroy the decades of hard work of others? Those people who said such things had never faced Yuan Tianqin before, right? Gu Xingyin recalled the cold and merciless gaze of that young man 10 years ago, and her heart trembled. Yuan Tianqin was still the same. But since that was the case, Gu Xingyin smiled. She was best at giving others a taste of their own medicine. After putting the money on the table, Gu Xingyin got up and walked out. Soon, she arrived at the competition venue of the Summoner Conference. Of course, it was the venue for the finals. Gu Xingyin looked at the jade slip in her hand. There was a bright red number, 27 on it. Of course, she was the kind with a background. When the contestants from 9 Hells Purgatory, Lin Yuan personally went to the organizer to ask for a spot, the expressions of those old fellows became more and more interesting. Even someone from 9 Hells Purgatory came, and it was Lin Yuan who personally came to ask for a spot. An old man in a white robe looked a little serious with a hint of expectation. I'm afraid that the Summoner Conference this time will be more exciting than we imagined. Lin Li exclaimed. 8 o'clock ended. Look at my sincere little eyes. Please vote, 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 vote. I'll dance in circles for you to see good nights. Chapter 1466. There wasn't much difference between the rules of the finals and the preliminaries. It was still a one-on-one competition. The winner would advance to the next round. If there was a difference, it was probably that the strength of the opponents increased with each round. Gu Xingyin attracted a lot of attention when she first went on stage. After all, the prefix of her name was 9 Hells Purgatory. Everyone had heard of 9 Hells Purgatory, but they had never heard of a summoner appearing there, so everyone was very curious. However, Gu Xingyin's performance had always been very normal. She had only summoned a level 9 magical beast, Flaming Skylark. Although it was also very powerful, it was still somewhat lacking compared to Yuan Tianqin and the others' amazing strength. Many people looked at Gu Xingyin and shook their heads, saying that this contestant from 9 Hells Purgatory was still too young compared to the others. In other words, they didn't think highly of her. However, Gu Xingyin didn't care. She naturally had her reasons for doing so. Yuan Tianqin also paid attention to Gu Xingyin. When he heard that the other party was from 9 Hells Purgatory, his expression instantly turned cold. The hatred of having his tongue cut off 10 years ago was still in his heart. As long as there was a chance, he would never let go of a chance to take revenge. Yuan Tianqi naturally also hated in her heart. Yuan Tianqi only lost a tongue, but she, her entire person, had lost the rules to become a summoner. No one knew how much effort she had put in to be able to stay in the Yuan family, and no one knew how much effort she had put in to stay by Yuan Tianqin's side and become his most trusted subordinate. But that wasn't important anymore. She stayed by Yuan Tianqin's side, and the two of them had the same goal: to take revenge one day. To take revenge on the ruler of 9 Hells Purgatory, the Lord of the Abyss, and Yuan Tianyi, who had caused them to become like this. However, the funny thing was that the two of them were gnashing their teeth in hatred, but when they saw Gu Shengyin, they didn't recognize her. Originally, Yuan Tianyi didn't have a good life in the Yuan family. When she was 10 years old, she was the same as other children when they were 7 or 8 years old. Skinny, small, pale, and her delicate face was lowered all year round. She didn't attract any attention. However, things were different in 9 Hells Purgatory. Lin Yuan almost treated Gu Shengyin as a treasure in the palm of his hand. In the vast 9 Hells Purgatory, there were countless treasures. Those heavenly and earthly treasures with mild medicinal properties that outsiders coveted were all given to Gu Shengyin as snacks by Lin Yuan. After 10 years, Gu Shengyin and Yuan Tianyi as a child, whether in appearance or temperament, were like two different people. She also used a fake name to participate in the competition, Gu Yuan. It would be strange if those two could still recognize her. However, even if he didn't recognize that Gu Shengyin was Yuan Tianyi, who they had hated for 10 years, Yuan Tianqin didn't plan to let her go when he heard that she was from 9 Hells Purgatory. Since he couldn't take revenge on Yuan Tianyi and the Lord of the Abyss, he could vent his anger on those who were related to them. Wasn't he afraid of being held accountable for the competition? When he was nervous, he didn't know how to control his strength. If something went wrong, he wouldn't be able to control it, right? No matter how strong you are, the Lord of the Abyss can't be unreasonable, right? However, Yuan Tianqin, who had a good plan in his heart, did not expect that Gu Shengyin, who was already a cripple in his eyes, had the same idea in his heart. Chapter 1467. Although the two sides hadn't met yet, they had been secretly looking forward to it for a long time. Finally, Gu Shengyin heard the voice she had been waiting for a long time. Next match, number 27 Gu Yuan versus number 38 Yuan Tianqin. Gu Shengyin calmly walked into the arena. In order to avoid Yuan Tianqin's suspicion, Lin Yuan hadn't appeared in the arena. However, Gu Shengyin knew that person must be watching her from somewhere not far away. At this time, Yuan Tianqin also stood in the arena. Yuan Qin stood closest to the arena, so she could act as Yuan Tianqin's mouthpiece at any time. Gu Shengyin smiled, raised her hand, and saluted. I've long heard of the Yuan family's genius. Yuan Tianqin just looked at her coldly. Yuan Qin said, there's no need to salute people from the 9 Hells Purgatory. Let's start. The competition has no eyes, so it's better to be careful. Gu Shengyin didn't get angry, as if she didn't hear Yuan Qin's threat. She just smiled and said, thank you for your concern, but I might not be able to control my emotions during the competition. You have to be careful too. Yuan Tianqin sneered, feeling sad for this little girl who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He had seen her previous matches. Although she was indeed very strong, there was still a certain gap between her and him. Yuan Tianqin was almost certain that he could win this match. He glanced at Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin immediately said, since both sides admit that they might not be able to control their emotions during the competition, if something unexpected happens later, it's best that we don't blame each other. Yuan Qin's voice was very loud, so Gu Shengyin was sure that the judges and audience had heard it. She was still smiling as she nodded. When Yuan Tianqin turned around, a cold smile appeared on his lips. Gu Shengyin saw it. She was also laughing in her heart. You were waiting for this sentence, but how would you know that I was also waiting for you to say it? The competition officially began. Both sides summoned their beasts at the first moment. It was also a magical beast of the 9th rank. Yuan Tianqin's purple-winged thunder dragon was domineering and powerful, while the flame skylark behind Gu Shengyin was graceful. The situation was on the verge of breaking out. Actually, at their age, they were far from being able to fully control a magical beast of the 9th rank. But even if it was only a part of their strength, the power displayed by the two magical beasts of the 9th rank was still very impressive. Among the few matches today, this was the most interesting one. But was Gu Shengyin really unable to fully control a magical beast of the 9th rank? That was not the case. Summoners used their soul strength to determine their strength. In this aspect, there was probably no summoner in the entire continent of magical beasts that could compare to Gu Shengyin. She just liked to see her opponent pour a bucket of cold water over his head when he thought that victory was in his hands. Wasn't Yuan Tianqin arrogant? I'll let you enjoy yourself for a while. Later, she would tell him what true despair was. The two magical beasts in the field had already begun to fight. They were both magical beasts of the 9th rank that were famous for their attacks. Moreover, they were the natural enemies of birds and beasts on land. In addition, their respective masters hated each other. As soon as these two magical beasts started fighting, they didn't even try to test each other. They just put on a desperate posture. Gu Shengyin watched quietly. Ordinary people seemed to think that it was a tie, but in the eyes of people with discerning eyes, the flame skylark just looked intimidating. In fact, it was still slightly inferior to the purple-winged thunder dragon. Chapter 1468. The strength displayed by the raging flame skylark was indeed slightly inferior to the purple-winged thunder dragon. Even a few moments of carelessness caused her gorgeous feathers to be scratched off by the other party's claws. Yuan Tianqin's lips curled into a smile. He closed his eyes, and his mind moved slightly, as if issuing some order. At this moment, the purple-winged thunder dragon suddenly opened its mouth, and a huge purple lightning bolt struck towards the raging flame skylark. This lightning bolt was obviously menacing, and the raging flame skylark hurriedly dodged backwards. According to the normal development, this purple-winged thunder dragon should take advantage of the victory to pursue and attack, taking advantage of the raging flame skylark's flustered state to give a head-on blow. In this way, the outcome of this competition could basically be determined. But the purple-winged thunder dragon didn't do so. What Yuan Tianqin wanted was not just such a victory. The purple-winged thunder dragon's huge body suddenly turned in one direction, heading towards Gu Shengyin, who was looking worriedly at the raging flame skylark. A bolt of lightning comparable to the attack just now shot out from its mouth, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Gu Shengyin. Such a powerful attack, even a 9th rank magical beast like the raging flame skylark with super strong defense, didn't dare to meet it head-on. If the summoner's weak body faced it, many people had quietly turned their heads away, unable to bear to see the next scene. Yuan Tianqin, on the other hand, stared unblinkingly in the direction of Gu Shengyin, and even a trace of excitement mixed with expectation appeared in his eyes. That bolt of lightning, without any accident, fell straight on top of Gu Shengyin's head. However, the scene of blood splattering out that everyone imagined did not appear. A soft silver-white halo appeared beside Gu Shengyin, blocking this fatal blow for her. When the light dissipated, a beautiful and elegant figure appeared beside Gu Shengyin. She had a graceful posture, beautiful hair, and gentle eyes as she quietly looked at the field. The most eye-catching thing was the huge jade-colored horn on her head. Unicorn. Some of the spectators had already recognized the species of this magical beast. At the front of the judging panel, the sharp-eyed judges immediately recognized that it was not only a unicorn, but also the king of unicorns, the moonlight unicorn. What's going on? Why would a saint beast suddenly appear here? While the judge was speaking, his fiery gaze was still fixed on the unicorn in the middle of the field. That was a saint beast. It was a saint-level magical beast that many high-level summoners yearned for, but never got to see in their entire lives. Only Yuan Tianqin didn't look good. Just now, he had almost succeeded. Referee, is this considered cheating? Yuan Qin said coldly to the referee at the side. When summoners competed, they could only fight with their summoned beasts. Gu Xingyin's summoned beast was obviously the fiery skylark. Even if she summoned a sacred beast, it would not change the fact that she had broken the rules. The referee was stunned for a moment, then he turned around and looked at Gu Xingyin seriously. I announce that because one of the contestants has broken the rules. Wait a minute. Gu Xingyin suddenly shouted. All eyes fell on her from all directions. Gu Xingyin slightly raised the corner of her lips and smiled arrogantly. Who said I cheated? Who set the rule that a summoner can only have one summoned beast? Chapter 1469. She raised her palm high up in the air. Everyone could clearly see that a mysterious array was shining in the center of her right palm. At the same time, the same array appeared on the forehead of the Moonlight Unicorn. In other words, this Moonlight Unicorn holy beast was really summoned by her. The crowd was in an uproar. A summoner could only summon one magical beast. This was a law that had been around for thousands of years. And now, this law had been broken. Everyone in the audience was looking at Gu Xingyin and the unicorn beside her. For a moment, no one cared about the outcome of this match. Yuan Tianqin looked at this scene with an ashen face. When he saw Gu Xingyin's right hand light up, he knew that no matter what, he had already lost in some aspects of this match. At this moment, Gu Xingyin raised her head and smiled at him. That laughter contained undisguised mockery and complacency, clearly mocking his previous thoughts. An unknown anger surged in his heart. Outside the arena, Yuan Qin looked at the referee and asked, "Referee, the match hasn't ended yet. Please continue with your ruling." The referee was stunned for a moment. He clearly didn't expect Yuan Tianqin's side to take the initiative to request to continue the match. After all, in his mind, Gu Xingyin had one more summoned beast. Moreover, it was a holy beast, so the outcome was obvious. Yuan Tianqin also thought about it for a moment. Although the Moonlight Unicorn holy beast was powerful, it wasn't focused on attacking. It was more focused on speed and bringing good luck. In other words, it didn't have much attacking power. In that case, he didn't necessarily have no chance of winning. At this moment, Gu Xingyin spoke again. "Young Master Yuan, are you sure we want to continue?" She pointed at the Moonlight Unicorn beside her and the flaming skylark behind her. She smiled proudly. "If we continue, we won't be fighting one-on-one anymore." She purposely emphasized the words, one-on-one, as if to emphasize something. Yuan Tianqin looked at her proud expression and tone and felt displeased. He simply ignored Gu Xingyin. Yuan Qin directly said to the referee, "Can we continue?" When the referee saw that neither of them had any intention of stopping, he could only announce the continuation of the match. At this time, the atmosphere in the field had reached its climax. Everyone was excitedly watching the 2-versus-1 battle in the field. There was even a legendary sacred beast participating in the battle. There were even spectators from other competition venues who rushed over after hearing the news. For a moment, there was a sea of people. Everyone's focus was on Gu Xingyin. Even the judges were sighing. No wonder they felt that something was wrong. The 9 Hells Purgatory had never produced a disciple before. It was impossible for them to produce a disciple this time. She was just an ordinary genius. So the surprise was waiting for him here. In the field, Gu Xingyin didn't rush to make a move. Instead, she said to Yuan Tianqin seriously, "If you really want to compete again, I won't hold back anymore." Yuan Tianqin's response was that the purple-winged thunder dragon behind him soared up, and purple lightning shot towards them. Gu Xingyin clicked her tongue and shook her head. "I already said not to be impulsive. When I get serious, even I am afraid of myself." She stretched out her right hand again. After the Moonlight Unicorn holy beast blocked the purple-winged thunder dragon's attack, everyone's eyes fell on Gu Xingyin. What was she going to do? Chapter 1470. Soon they knew what Gu Xingyin was going to do. This was because as the white lights lit up one after another, 3 figures appeared consecutively in the field. The people in the audience were stunned. Even the judges were so shocked by this scene that they were speechless. 9 nether soul-devouring beast, red flame beast, and blue-eyed golden-eyed beast. 3 holy beasts appeared in the field. Many people felt that there might be something wrong with their eyes. But it was fine if there was something wrong with their eyes, but could it be that there was something wrong with everyone's eyes? This, really, living in the legends, the magical beasts that ordinary people had only seen in ancient records in their lifetime, now all appeared in front of them. Most of them turned to look at Gu Shengyin in shock. Who was this girl who could summon so many high-level and even saint-level magical beasts? No wonder, with such strength, no wonder the 9 nether purgatory let her out. Not to mention that she summoned a bunch of saint-level magical beasts. Even if she summoned a bunch of low-level magical beasts, with the number, she could kill a lot of people. Gu Shengyin kept looking at Yuan Tianqin. The moment Yuan Tianqin saw these 3 magical beasts, his face became strange. He seemed to open his mouth, but how could Gu Shengyin give him a chance to admit defeat? She moved her divine soul, and the blue-eyed golden-eyed beast, which was as huge as a hill, roared. Only its roar could be heard in the whole field, and some people with weaker physiques were even directly shaken to the point that their faces turned pale. The judge naturally couldn't hear any other sound. At this moment, except for the moonlight unicorn, which had been quietly guarding Gu Shengyin, the other 4 top magical beasts directly used 4 killing moves in the direction of the purple-winged thunder dragon and Yuan Tianqin. The dust settled. Yuan Qin, who was standing outside the field, looked pale. She and Yuan Tianqin were connected mentally, and at this moment, she could feel that the connection between them was so weak that it almost didn't exist. What did this mean? It meant that Yuan Tianqin was now in a very bad state, and might even die at any time. Everyone was still in a state of shock. Seeing this scene, they didn't even react. It was Gu Shengyin who reminded the referee, who looked like he was sleepwalking. She seemed to be a little uneasy. "Referee, I already said that if I use my full strength, I won't be able to control them. After all, my soul force is limited. There are so many big fellows, and they won't listen to my orders." All the demonic beasts, yes, Master's acting skills were superb. Since their master had said so, these magical beasts naturally had to give face. Their eyes were cold and arrogant, as if they didn't put anyone in their eyes. At this moment, Gu Shengyin spoke up again. "That, the eldest son of the Zhen family." She pointed at a crater that had been smashed into the ground. "You are lying." At this time, a sharp voice came from outside the arena. It was Yuan Qin, who had a crazy look on her face. She stared at Gu Shengyin and said, "Stop pretending. You're obviously trying to kill young Master Shao on purpose." Gu Shengyin had an innocent look on her face. She looked at Yuan Qin with a look of understanding. "Let's not talk about it anymore. Let the rescue team come in first," she said very understandingly. However, the rescue team stood outside the arena and looked at the 5 domineering magical beasts in the arena. They didn't dare to come in at all. This contestant herself said that she might not be able to control these magical beasts. What if they went in and encountered these magical beasts that were fierce? Chapter 1471. Therefore, the rescue workers all looked at the referee for help. The referee expressed that he was also quite helpless when he looked at those ferocious big guys just now. In the end, the referee and the rescue workers could only look at Gu Shengyin for help. Their thoughts in their hearts were like this: "Since this situation was caused by you, of course, you should be responsible for it." Under their burning gazes, Gu Shengyin could only laboriously recite a very tedious incantation, and then finally let these big guys of the magical beast world go back. Without the shocking pressure in the field, the rescue workers finally remembered their work and went to the field. But when they saw Yuan Tianqin, who was still at the bottom of the pit, they all gasped. This was just too tragic. When the rescue workers went forward, they couldn't help but reach out to check Yuan Tianqin's breath. To be honest, it was already a miracle that he was still alive. The representative of the Yuan family who came with Yuan Tianqin couldn't help but angrily complain, saying that Gu Shengyin hid the intention to kill. In the face of the Yuan family's complaint, Gu Shengyin's face turned pale, and then she seemed to be very uncomfortable and directly fainted. A figure in red appeared beside her and held her firmly in his arms. Feeling the power in Gu Shengyin's body, Lin Yuan said to the referee indifferently. She overexerted herself and fainted because her body couldn't support it. After saying that, he didn't waste any more time and said, "I'll take her back to rest." Then he disappeared. Referee. He could only announce that Gu Yuan from the Nine Hells Purgatory won this game. As soon as she returned to her courtyard, Gu Xingyin woke up. Lin Yuan couldn't help but laugh. "You are really too bad." Gu Xingyin said innocently, "I just don't want to face the Yuan family's unreasonable people." She knew very well what kind of moral conduct the Yuan family had. They had always only allowed others to do what they were allowed to do, and that was wrong. If she couldn't defeat Yuan Tianqin this time, she would either die or be disabled. If that was the case, the Zhen family would definitely say that the atmosphere on the stage was tense, and it was normal for them to be unable to hold back, or something along those lines. But if things turned out like this, and the person who fell was Yuan Tianqin, they would immediately change their attitude. All in all, they were pushing all the blame onto Gu Xingyin. Everything was the fault of the person who hurt her. Gu Xingyin, did he really think everyone was a fool? In the Zhen family's courtyard, several doctors surrounded the bed to check on Yuan Tianqin's condition. Not far away, the person in charge of the Yuan family's trip and some disciples were guarding the side. Seeing a doctor come out, the person in charge of the Yuan family, who had been anxious all this time, hurried forward and asked, "How is our first young master?" Hearing this, the doctor could only sigh. When the middle-aged man from the Yuan family saw this, his heart sank. The doctor continued, "With such injuries, it's already a miracle that first young master is still alive. But now, even if he can wake up, I'm afraid he can only spend the rest of his life in bed." In other words, Yuan Tianqin was crippled. Then, can first young master still be a summoner? The middle-aged man held on to the last glimmer of hope. It didn't matter if he couldn't move, the key was his talent. Chapter 1472. When the doctor heard this, he still shook his head. This time, not only was the eldest young master's body damaged, but his soul was also seriously injured, so there was a strong sense of regret in the doctor's words. After all, the eldest young master of the Yuan family was absolutely amazing in terms of talent. Who would have thought that a summoner convention would cause him to suffer such an unexpected disaster? The middle-aged man felt as if he was struck by lightning. It's over, it's over. This was the only thought in his mind at the moment. In order to compete for the position of the leader of the team this time, he had spent a lot of energy and means. Because this time, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the eldest young master had a high chance of winning first place. Since that was the case, as the leader of the team, he would definitely be praised by the family. But who would have thought that something like this would happen halfway through? The middle-aged man felt that he was simply too unlucky. The most talented eldest young master in the family had become like this, and as the leader of the team, he actually didn't stop the other party from killing him. This was his fault in itself. But in that situation, the middle-aged man thought of the 5 magical beasts surrounding the girl and shuddered. In that case, even if he had rushed over, he was afraid that at most, there would be one more person lying on the bed. He was so irritated in his heart that when he sent the doctor away, he stuffed a large amount of red packets. Those doctors also knew what he meant, and they all said that they would never leak the news. The middle-aged man was right. Yuan Tianqin wasn't the only one from the younger generation of the Yuan family participating in the summoner convention this time. Although there were a few who weren't as good as Yuan Tianqin, they were still rare geniuses. If those people could achieve good results, when he returned to the family, his life would be better. Therefore, he had to hide the fact that Yuan Tianqin was crippled, including the Yuan family. Except for his own few talents, he had to hide the rest of the Yuan family members who came with him. Especially the other younger generation of the Yuan family, he absolutely couldn't let them know, so as not to affect their performance in the future. But things often didn't go as planned. The middle-aged man hadn't even thought of how to announce the eldest young master's injury to the outside world yet, but rumors had already spread. They said that Yuan Tianqin was dead, that Yuan Tianqin was crippled, and that the Yuan family was probably done for this time, and that they would never be able to stand up again. There were all kinds of words. What depressed the middle-aged man the most was that the Yuan clan's old ancestor, who was in seclusion, had heard the news from somewhere and rushed over personally. The middle-aged man was so scared that he didn't even dare to breathe. However, Yuan family's old ancestor wasn't in the mood to take it to heart. After he personally went to see Yuan Tianqin, his face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Tell me in detail what exactly is going on. The Yuan family's ancestor's expression was extremely ugly. The middle-aged man carefully recounted the entire process of the competition, not leaving out even the slightest detail. Even though he already knew the gist of the situation, the Yuan family's old ancestor was still infuriated when he heard the entire story from the middle-aged man. What a waterside lord, what a Yuan Tianyi! How merciless! The Yuan family's old ancestor snorted coldly as the solid wooden armrest he was holding on to shattered into powder. The middle-aged man lowered his head deeply. Yuan Tianyi. Chapter 1473. The middle-aged man was the son of the law enforcement elder and a direct descendant of the Yuan family. He knew a little about what happened that year. He had heard the name of the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, from his father. Not only that, he had also heard a secret from his father. It was a secret that he had never heard of before. The third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, had awakened the bloodline of an ancient summoner. The law enforcement elder hadn't told him anything else. He vaguely remembered that he was shocked back then. But later, the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, had mysteriously disappeared from the Yuan family, and he had gradually forgotten the name. Now, hearing the old ancestor's tone, and thinking of how the girl named Gu Yuan had summoned the 5 magical beasts with a wave of her hand, the middle-aged man silently suppressed the shock in his heart. Until the old ancestor left. He couldn't help but gasp. Could it be that Gu Yuan was the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi? The Yuan family disciples present had been ordered not to spread what had happened in the Yuan family's cultivation hall. They didn't know what exactly had happened, but they had tried to find out some information. It was said that the third Miss and the eldest young master had a conflict. At that time, the Yuan family of course chose the eldest young master and gave up on the third Miss. No one felt that this choice was wrong. After all, in their eyes, the eldest young master was the future of the Yuan family, and the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, was just a dispensable existence. But now, the middle-aged man remembered yesterday's red dress fluttering in the wind, and the giant magical beasts circling her with a wave of her hand. Then he remembered the eldest young master who was still lying unconscious on the bed. He sighed, thinking that the family's decision back then was really wrong. The girl's name was Gu Yuan, not Yuan Tianyi, and she didn't show any mercy when facing the eldest young master. It was obvious that the third Miss no longer had any feelings for the Yuan family. The middle-aged man shook his head. No matter what, the original decision had been made, and now there was an irreconcilable conflict between the third Miss and the Yuan family. It was the old ancestor and the family head who should think about what to do. It was better for him to be an honest person who didn't know anything. The old ancestor of the Yuan family went directly to the place where Lin Yuan and Gu Shengyin were staying. But they refused to see him. Go and tell the person that we're very busy and we're not familiar with each other. There's nothing to see, Gu Shengyin said slowly to the person who came to report. That person was a housekeeper that they had conveniently bought when they bought this courtyard. As an ordinary person, he didn't even know what the Yuan clan's old ancestor represented, so it was only natural for him to reject the offer. The Yuan family's old ancestor's face turned ashen. He didn't enter the door directly but had someone announce his arrival. This was already giving the host a lot of face. The old ancestor of the Yuan family thought that he had already lowered his stance, but he didn't expect the other party to be so arrogant. Since that was the case, the meeting he had prepared was meaningless. Seeing that the face of the ordinary person in front of him had turned pale because of his aura, the old ancestor of the Yuan clan harumphed coldly and turned around to leave. He wasn't so low as to make things difficult for an ordinary person. But Abyssal Lord, and that Yuan Tianyi who had no respect for her family, the Yuan family's old ancestor narrowed his eyes. He would make them pay. Gu Shengyin didn't need to guess to know what the Yuan family's old ancestor was thinking. These villains' cannon fodder always had these thoughts running through their minds. Chapter 1474. To be honest, Gu Shengyin wasn't afraid of the Yuan family at all. Although the Yuan family was powerful, they only had one peak saint expert, their forefather. He wasn't Lin Yuan's match at all. That aside, Gu Shengyin herself had been in the Nine Hells Purgatory for a long time. She had lived in the Nine Hells Purgatory for 10 years, and because her aura was extremely similar to that of the goddess of nature, she had attracted the attention of many magical beasts. Quite a few of them had been tricked by her for food, such as the moonlight unicorn. Gu Shengyin could create any plant she'd ever seen before. As someone who'd once become the goddess of nature, no one knew the plants of this world better than her. Thus, she could easily find out which tasty fruits were most popular with magical beasts. Nine Hells Purgatory had always been a place lacking in plants. It was only after Gu Shengyin's arrival that it slowly transformed into an otherworldly paradise. Other things aside, Gu Shengyin had already contracted many saint-level magical beasts. If she summoned any of them, the Yuan family's forefather wouldn't be able to deal with them in a short time. That was the source of her confidence. The Yuan family couldn't do anything to her. If you ask me if the Yuan family doesn't have eyes, I'll find a time to. A cold glint flashed through Lin Yuan's eyes. The ruler of Nine Hells Purgatory had never been a kind person. If he were, he wouldn't have been able to control those disobedient magical beasts. Bystanders saw his gentleness, but they didn't know that it was only because Gu Shengyin was standing in front of him. Gu Shengyin looked at him helplessly. Don't talk about exterminating people at the drop of a hat. To be honest, I don't have any deep grudges with the Yuan family. Those who did have grudges with me, Yuan Tianqin and Yuan Qin, have both been crippled. If the Yuan family stops now, there's no need for us to push our luck. After all, most of the Yuan family hadn't even heard of her name, much less had any grudges against her. Lin Yuan, playing with her fair and soft fingers. Lazily he said, "You're always so soft-hearted. You're like this to these humans, and you're also like this to those magical beasts." Therefore, those magical beasts loved to play with Gu Shengyin, and even rubbed against her body one by one. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan felt very unhappy. What if they don't stop? Gu Shengyin smiled, but the smile was cold no matter how one looked at it. They don't know what's good for them. Of course, we don't have to show mercy. It was true that she wasn't bloodthirsty, but that didn't mean that she wouldn't fight back when she was bullied. Hopefully, the Zhen family would be aware of this. Ever since the fight with Yuan Tianqin, Gu Yuan's name had become famous. All the contestants were secretly praying that they wouldn't have to face her. What a joke. If he were to go up against another participant, he might still stand a chance. Even if he were to lose, he would at least be able to make it look good. If he were to face this person, if a few saint beasts unleashed their ultimate attacks, who would be able to block them? If they didn't believe it, it was said that the eldest son of the Yuan family was still lying in bed. And according to the news, the eldest son could only lie in bed for the rest of his life. Therefore, every time Gu Shengyin went up on the stage, before she could summon her opponent would show an ugly face and admit defeat. Since they were going to lose anyway, they might as well save their strength to deal with other opponents. This was what everyone thought. Therefore, Gu Shengyin went all the way to the end without any hindrance. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this scene, but no one blamed those who gave up. Chapter 1475. After all, he would only lose face if he admitted defeat. However, if he continued to fight, he would lose his life. Yuan Qin did not look too good. He was from a collateral branch of the Yuan family. He was accepted into the main family because he was talented. However, while his talent was good in other places, it wasn't that outstanding in the Yuan clan, where geniuses were as common as clouds. There were many people like him who could enjoy treatment that others could not. However, he did not have a strong presence in the Yuan family. When he found out that his opponent was Gu Yuan, who had defeated the eldest young master, Yuan Qin roared in his heart. He was prepared to admit defeat. He was not stupid. Even the eldest young master was no match for Gu Yuan. What was the point of him going up against him? Besides having another cannon fodder, it was meaningless. However, Yuan Qing did not expect that he would be summoned by the patriarch of the Yuan family. The patriarch was a legendary figure in their family. Yuan Qing went to see the patriarch excitedly. However, the patriarch only said one sentence and it made him feel cold. You are not allowed to admit defeat in the battle between you and Gu Yuan tomorrow. The patriarch did not care about the feelings of a collateral branch disciple. After he finished speaking, he asked his people to leave. Yuan Qing returned to his room in a daze. Soon, someone brought him a lot of treasures. The person in charge of delivering the treasures said enviously that the treasures were from the patriarch and asked him to perform well in the battle tomorrow. Perform well? A bitter smile appeared on Yuan Qing's face. What did it mean that he was not allowed to admit defeat against an opponent like Gu Yuan? Yuan Qing did not understand if the patriarch did not want him to admit defeat because he did not want to lose face, or if the patriarch wanted to use him to achieve something. He only knew that he might lose his life in the battle tomorrow. He sat on the chair in a daze. For the first time, he was dissatisfied with the cold Yuan family. Gu Xingyin also knew who her opponent was. Another member of the Yuan family? What a coincidence! Judging from the name, it should be a collateral branch disciple of the Yuan family. The battle was coming soon. There were many spectators for this battle. Some of them were even here for Gu Xingyin. They wanted to see what a summoner who could summon multiple magical beasts was like. Yuan Qing stood on the stage and looked at the girl opposite him. She was only in her 20s and was dressed in an extremely dazzling red robe. Her black hair was tied up high and her exquisite and bright face was indescribably flamboyant and unbridled. That's right. For someone like her, no matter how unbridled she was, it wouldn't be overboard. Gu Xingyin glanced at Yuan Qing. She did not know her. However, for someone to be able to reach this step, his strength would definitely not be weak. Both sides greeted each other according to the rules. The referee subconsciously waited for Yuan Qing to admit defeat. He was already used to it. Gu Yuan's matches were the most relaxed among all the matches that he had hosted, because there was no need to do anything at all. But soon he heard the roar of a magical beast. The judge turned around and saw that it was the contestant from the Yuan family who had summoned his beast. Did he not intend to admit defeat? Gu Xingyin was clearly surprised as well. She raised her eyebrows and summoned the blazing skylark without hesitation. Given Yuan Qing's strength, the blazing skylark was enough. When Yuan Qing saw that Gu Xingyin had only summoned one magical beast, he did not feel that she was underestimating him. He knew himself very well. Chapter 1476. Yuan Qing knew that even if she only summoned a flaming skylark, he wouldn't be a match for her, judging from the previous battle between her and Yuan Tianqin. But at least, even if he lost, he would lose in a good way. If she directly summoned all her magical beasts, Yuan Qing was sure that he would follow in the footsteps of the first young master. In fact, when Gu Xingyin saw Yuan Qing choose to fight, she was also a little surprised. She didn't think that Yuan Qing would choose to not admit defeat just because she had injured Yuan Tianqin. In fact, the relationship between the same generation in the Yuan family wasn't as good as imagined. Not to mention, Yuan Tianqin was arrogant and couldn't let go of anyone who was more talented than him. So, she also kept an eye on him. The flaming skylark, a level 9 magical beast, was undoubtedly one of the most powerful. Yuan Qing's magical beasts couldn't hold on any longer. The flaming skylark raised its head and let out a long cry. The red flames covering the sky and the earth spread toward Yuan Qing and his magical beasts. This wasn't a killing move. In fact, as long as Yuan Qing opened his mouth, Gu Xingyin could immediately make the flaming skylark stop. But Yuan Qing gritted his teeth and didn't speak. He watched helplessly as the sea of fire was about to touch his body. How dare you! An angry roar sounded in everyone's ears like thunder. The ancestor is here? Yuan Qing was delighted. The ancestor will save me, right? However, no one stopped the spread of the sea of fire. The next moment, A searing pain came from Yuan Qing's body. He forced himself to look in Gu Xingyin's direction. A huge black palm fell from the sky and fell straight toward her head. Yuan Qing was in despair. So this is what the ancestor is thinking? And he himself was the chess piece that had been abandoned. His consciousness was in a mess. On the other hand, Gu Shengyin smiled when he sensed the aura that seemed like it was going to destroy the world. She knew it. So this was what the Yuan family's ancestor was thinking. Was he going to get rid of her, a thorn in his side, at the risk of getting hurt? Unfortunately, before anyone could react, the huge black handprint had already landed on Gu Xingyin's head. Many people in the audience were shocked by this unexpected scene and stood up. Some of the judges even dared to step forward. A smile appeared on the face of the Yuan family's old ancestor. But the next moment, his smile froze on his face. Specks of white light appeared where Gu Xingyin was standing. When the giant black palm disappeared, everyone could clearly see Gu Xingyin's current appearance. She was still dressed in red, but she wasn't standing. Instead, she was sitting on a silver-white magic beast. It was the moonlight unicorn that had appeared before. At this moment, the moonlight unicorn's body was emitting a misty silver light, as if the moon had fallen on her body. There was a milky white halo that completely surrounded the moonlight unicorn and Gu Xingyin. Specks of light appeared around the man and the beast, and it was so beautiful that it seemed unreal. More importantly, under such an attack, Gu Xingyin was unharmed. How did she do it? At this moment, a judge's eyes suddenly lit up. He shouted, "It's the moonlight unicorn's innate ability, moonlight protection. Extreme defense that can ignore all attacks and last for 15 minutes. His face even turned red from excitement. This was a skill that only existed in ancient books. He was lucky enough to see it with his own eyes. Chapter 1477. Gu Xingyin frowned as she looked at her opponent. Yuan Qing had already fainted and his clothes were tattered by the flaming skylark's life spirit fire. The injuries on his body were a bit shocking. And this was under the condition that she had the flaming skylark stop attacking. Even so, Yuan Qing was still seriously injured. Gu Xingyin's heart was filled with disgust. She obviously didn't expect that in order to get rid of her, the Yuan family's ancestor would use his family's younger generation as bait. The most disgusting thing was that he clearly had the ability to save Yuan Qing, but he still chose to leave him in the lurch. How ruthless! She said faintly, "Referee, let's get someone to take a look at this person's injuries first." Only then did the referee come back to his senses. He quickly ordered people to carry Yuan Qing off the stage. At this time, someone from the Yuan family was not convinced and the person in charge directly scolded Gu Xingyin for being vicious. Gu Xingyin's face was cold. "I haven't even said anything yet and you're already slandering me?" She looked up at the referee and said aloud, "I want to complain that the Yuan family didn't follow the rules." She pointed at the place where she had been standing and sneered. As the ancestor of the Yuan family, a mighty saint-level expert, a renowned figure in the entire continent of magical beasts, you actually shamelessly launched a sneak attack on a junior like me while I was fighting. If this gets out, people will laugh their heads off. Shameless, she really dared to say it. Even the judges were amazed by her boldness. But thinking about it, this was a summoner who had several saint-level magical beasts. She really didn't have anything to be afraid of. The Yuan family's person in charge's face was red. His family's ancestor was being scolded in public. As a member of the Yuan family, he naturally didn't have any face. In fact, how could he not see through his ancestor's thoughts from the scene just now? But what could he say even if he knew? He was a member of the Yuan family, so naturally he had to put the Yuan family first. He could only forcefully refute. That was the ancestor's subconscious reaction when he saw that his family's disciple was in danger. Gu Xingyin sneered, "Please feel your conscience when you speak. That old ancestor of yours tried to kill me the moment he attacked. Did he care about my opponent in the slightest? If he really cared about his family's disciples, that Yuan family member of yours wouldn't have suffered such injuries." After she finished speaking, she cupped her hands at the judges and referees. "We, the people of 9 Hells Purgatory, will not be schemed against for nothing. Please give us a proper explanation. After she finished speaking, she didn't care about the expressions of the people around her and directly sat on the moonlight unicorn. In an instant, she disappeared from the competition grounds. The person in charge of the Gen family only felt that there were all kinds of eyes staring at him from all directions. He could sense the meaning behind those gazes. None of the people present were fools. Coupled with Gu Xingyin's words, they had a better understanding of the Gen family's plans. Who would have thought that a dignified saint-level expert would actually use such a sinister method on a junior in his 20s? Yet he still failed. The Yuan family was truly... The person in charge of the Yuan family felt tormented under such gazes. But he couldn't leave. If he did, it would only prove that the Yuan family was in the wrong. He secretly prayed for the ancestor's arrival. As long as the ancestor appeared, the pressure of a saint-level expert would suppress the crowd. Who would dare say a word? Unfortunately, the Yuan family's ancestor couldn't make it. Chapter 1478. The Yuan family's ancestor wasn't far from the arena to begin with. He was very confident in his sure-kill move, but when he saw that Gu Xingyin was completely unharmed, his heart sank. She didn't show the slightest hint of panic from beginning to end. It didn't seem like a normal reaction at all. The Yuan family's ancestor, who loved conspiracy theories, instantly felt that this might be a trap. He subconsciously wanted to leave. It had to be said that his premonition was very accurate, but his reaction was still a step too slow. For some reason, the area he was in had been completely sealed off. The Yuan family's ancestor's heart trembled. To be able to set up a barrier in this area without him noticing, and to have a close relationship with him recently, he had a rough idea of the person's identity. As expected, Lin Yuan's figure appeared in the air in front of him. What is the meaning of this, Lin Yuan Lord? The Yuan family's ancestor was on high alert, but his face was filled with confusion and anger. Lin Yuan Lord sneered, but didn't want to waste words with this old thing. He raised his head, and a long sword that was still burning with crimson flames appeared in his hand. The Yuan family's ancestor's eyes narrowed. Judging from the other party's appearance, he couldn't be kind anymore. However, a faint premonition in his heart told him that he couldn't fight Lin Yuan Lord head-on. He wasn't Lin Yuan Lord's match. The Yuan family's ancestor forced himself to calm down. Lin Yuan Lord, you forcibly set up a barrier on the Devil Beast continent and attacked without saying a word. Could it be that you're treating the Devil Beast continent as your 9 hells purgatory? Lin Yuan Lord sneered. The long sword in his hand didn't make any fancy movements, and he only lightly slashed in the direction of the Yuan family's ancestor. There wasn't any earth-shattering movement, but the Yuan family's ancestor's hair stood on end. Wherever the long sword's sword light passed, black cracks would appear. A sword cut through space. Not daring to be careless, the Yuan family's ancestor hurriedly retreated, barely dodging the sword. However, the other sword had already caught up to him. Abyssal Lord looked relaxed the entire time. If it weren't for the fact that wherever his sword passed, the space would collapse, others would have thought that he was just practicing his sword dance leisurely. In comparison, the Yuan family's old ancestor wasn't as relaxed. He only felt that every time the Abyssal Lord's sword was about to touch his skin, and every time he dodged, he could feel the heat that seemed to be burning his soul. In the past, he only knew that Abyssal Lord was very strong. But only after truly exchanging blows did he realize just how strong Abyssal Lord was. No wonder the people of the 9 Hells Purgatory had such an expression. Old bastard from the Yuan clan. Lin Yuan finally spoke. However, the words he spoke caused the Yuan ancestor to burn with rage. He had been known as a genius on the magical beast continent since he was young. Later on, his path had been smooth sailing until he became a saint-level expert who stood at the peak of the entire continent. In his entire life, he had always received the respect and adoration of others. When had he ever endured such humiliation? But Abyssal Lord didn't even consider whether he was happy or not. Of course, the more unhappy the Yuan family's patriarch was, the better Lin Yuan's mood would be. He continued, I, Lin Yuan, have never wanted someone's life as much as I do today. There were many people in the world who wanted his life, but he didn't care at all. Because he knew that others wouldn't have the chance. However, anyone who had any ideas about Tian-yi deserved to die. Chapter 1479. When he heard Lin Yuan's words, the Yuan family forefather understood that he wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. He cast aside all thoughts of luck and focused on finding an opportunity to escape. He wasn't looking for a chance to counterattack, but a chance to escape. That's right, escape. If the two of them were evenly matched, the Yuan family forefather might have fought Lin Yuan to the death. Who would survive would depend on strength and luck. But things were different now. The difference in strength between him and Lin Yuan was too great. If this continued, there would only be one outcome: his death and Lin Yuan's death. The Yuan family forefather didn't want to die. Sage realm experts had long lifespans. He still had an unlimited amount of time to live. He wanted to pursue a higher realm and bring the Yuan family to greater heights. He wanted. His thoughts came to an abrupt halt. A scarlet sword slowly pierced through his neck. Lin Yuan released the long sword in his hand, and the long sword condensed from flames instantly drilled into the Yuan family's old ancestors' wounds. The Yuan family forefather couldn't endure the bone-piercing pain and howled in agony. That flame had entered his internal organs through his wounds and even into his soul. It burned his blood, devoured his flesh, and ground away at his soul. It was more torturous than any torture in the world. Lin Yuan quietly watched the scene unfold before him. He knew the Yuan family forefather wouldn't survive. The long sword was formed from the most tyrannical earthcore fire in the depths of 9 Hell's purgatory. It was said to be the most tyrannical flame in the world. It could even refine souls. Lin Yuan could have burned the Yuan family forefather to ashes in an instant, but he hadn't. He wanted to properly entertain the old man and repay him for his evil intentions toward Tianyi. This flame would burn for a total of 49 days. He glanced coldly at the Yuan family forefather, who was lying on the ground, unable to get up, then turned and left. During these 49 days, the Yuan family forefather was conscious. He could feel every inch of the flame wreaking havoc in his body. However, he couldn't open his eyes, speak, or do anything. He could only endure the pain in vain and walk towards death in despair. In order to prevent others from disturbing him, Lin Yuan even placed a restriction on the Yuan family's ancestor's body. Other than the Yuan family, no one could see him. As for the Yuan family, a trace of coldness flashed through Lin Yuan's eyes. They should pray for their own good fortune. Perhaps everything in this world was fate. Not long after Lin Yuan left, a figure in a white dress walked into the alley. It was Yuan Qin. She had been having a hard time recently. In the past 10 years, she had always been with Yuan Tianqin. Yuan Tianqin trusted and doted on her, so she lived a good life. Even if she couldn't cultivate, the geniuses of the Yuan family would still treat her with respect. With Yuan Tianqin's character, it was easy for him to offend people. It was just that with his strength before, the others dared to be angry in their hearts but did not dare to say anything. But things were different now. The news of Yuan Tianqin becoming a cripple wasn't kept a secret. Everyone knew about it. The disciples of the Yuan family who had been bullied by Yuan Tianqin wouldn't bother with an unconscious cripple. Therefore, Yuan Qin, who used to be Yuan Tianqin's most trusted aide, naturally received their extra attention. Chapter 1480. So these days, Yuan Qin always encountered all kinds of accidents in all kinds of situations. She was very angry. But what was the point? Her biggest backer had been crippled. She herself was just an ordinary person who couldn't cultivate. And those people from the Yuan family who made things difficult for her were all at least intermediate summoners. Today, she finally managed to avoid those people and came out to take a breather. But as soon as she came out, she saw the person lying in the alley. The old man's clothes looked very familiar. Yuan Qin's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help but walk closer to take a look. Then she gasped. The person lying on the ground was actually the Yuan family's ancestor. Yuan Qin was very scared. She didn't know why the ancestor fainted here. Did something go wrong with his cultivation? Or was he plotted against? In comparison, the latter was more likely. But how terrifying was it to be able to turn a dignified saint expert into an existence like this? The Yuan family's ancestor was the pillar of the Yuan family. If he died, the Yuan family's thousands of years of foundation and countless resources would definitely be lost. Yuan Qin reached out her hand and carefully touched the ancestor's nose. Fortunately, there was still air. She sighed in relief. But before she could relax, something unexpected happened. A wisp of scarlet flames suddenly surged out of the ancestor's nose and pounced on Yuan Qin's body. Yuan Qin subconsciously pulled her hand back, but it was useless. The flames had already touched her body. An intense pain came from Yuan Qin's fingertips, and then the little flames suddenly exploded. Before Yuan Qin could react, it spread to her whole body. The ancestor's body could last for 49 days, but Yuan Qin was just an ordinary person. What would happen when an ordinary person's body encountered the world's most tyrannical flames? Yuan Qin still remembered her unwillingness at the last second before the flames devoured her consciousness. She still hadn't become a real person. She still hadn't taken revenge on that bitch Yuan Tianyi. She still, wherever the transparent flame passed, her entire body would turn into a part of the flame. In the blink of an eye, everything was burned to ashes and the flames were extinguished. There was a small pinch of fine dust on the ground. When a gust of wind blew, the fine dust drifted to every corner of the ground, just like any speck of dust in this mortal world. Not a single trace was left behind. Gu Xingyin, who was waiting for Lin Yuan to return in the courtyard, suddenly received a system prompt in her mind, saying that the mission target had died. Gu Xingyin? Why didn't she know what had happened to Yuan Qin? The system dutifully transmitted what Lin Yuan had done and Yuan Qin's experience into her mind. Even Gu Xingyin was dumbfounded. This was too much of a coincidence. Lin Yuan had just set up such a restriction, and Yuan Qin just so happened to walk out, and just so happened to go to the place where the Yuan clan ancestor was. Turning into ashes, no one even knew that he had died. Such an outcome was absolutely unacceptable to Yuan Qin, right? After all, with that woman's ambition, she wanted nothing more than to stand at the peak of the Devil Beast continent. But this was good news for Gu Xingyin. Chapter 1481. She was thinking with her head down when a warm body suddenly pressed against her from behind. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Gu Xingyin took the opportunity to lean back and asked lazily, "Have you finished what you wanted to do?" Lin Yuan had told her that he was going to do something and asked her to come back first. Lin Yuan nodded, "It's all taken care of." Gu Xingyin smiled, "Let's go back." Lin Yuan was stunned. "Go back? Aren't you going to finish the summoner conference?" Gu Xingyin shook her head, "I just wanted to play with the Yuan family. Now that even Yuan Tianqin was defeated by me, there's no reason for me to stay." "You don't want the title of summoner's young king?" Lin Yuan turned his head and kissed her ear. Gu Xingyin tilted her head to avoid his kiss and laughed, "What's the use of that thing to me?" Moreover, even if she didn't continue to participate, who could deny that she was the strongest person? Lin Yuan didn't say anything and the two left directly. The next day, no one came to participate in Gu Xingyin's competition. When the organizer of the summoner conference came to check, they found that the young summoner with unlimited potential from 9 Hells Purgatory had already disappeared. In the end, because of Gu Xingyin's absence, the champion of this summoner conference was won by another genius. The Yuan family, which was said to be the most likely to win the championship, only had one disciple in the top 10. However, although Gu Xingyin didn't win the championship, in everyone's heart, she was the most powerful young summoner. Not only among the young summoners, but many people even thought that this summoner called Gu Yuan could completely jump out of the circle of young people and truly become the top summoner in the entire magical beast continent. Because of her, there were even many people who wanted to visit 9 Hells Purgatory to learn regardless of the danger, but they couldn't enter. According to Lin Yuan's words, those humans were all evil. Letting them in was simply destroying the environment of 9 Hells Purgatory. Gu Xingyin agreed with this. She also did not want some strange humans to disturb their peaceful life. Gu Xingyin and Lin Yuan entered into a companion contract under the witness of countless devil beasts in 9 Hell's Purgatory. They officially became partners who would never abandon each other in life and death. From then on, Gu Xingyin began to live the life of a goddess who had everything she needed. Lin Yuan had originally placed her in the palm of his hand and doted on her. After the two of them officially got together, this doting instantly rose several levels. Even Gu Xingyin's magical beasts started to avoid arousing suspicion. Unless Gu Xingyin summoned them, they would not appear. It was simply too torturous. In her spare time, Gu Xingyin would occasionally pay attention to the happenings in the magical beast continent. 3 years later, the Yuan clan was unable to hide the news of their ancestor's death. Naturally, the other clans with similar strength to the Yuan clan wouldn't let go of such an opportunity. Thus, after a few rounds of coercion and carving up, the great family that was once second to none in the Dragon Phoenix Empire instantly fell apart and ceased to exist. 10 years later, a mysterious woman claimed to have come from 9 Hell's Purgatory. She led countless powerful magical beasts and challenged all the saint-level experts in the magical beast continent. She was undefeated. She never mentioned her name, but everyone knew that this woman was the one who shocked the entire magical beast continent during the Summoner Conference 10 years ago. Gu Yuan, you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.